Hey, everybody.
Morgan, it's great to see you. I appreciate all the work you do. I know you're incredibly passionate about AI's potential. So the first thing I want to ask you, how are you currently using AI in your everyday workflow? What discoveries have you made?
I think of AI as really like an additional assistant. I use it for almost everything. I'm writing a company memo, thinking about our strategy, and I will, write out the actual memo and then drop it in AI to say, revise this. Now, I don't put any confidential information in there because we're not quite there yet, right? But I do use it for vocabulary and tone adjustments. And I even play with it sometimes where I'll say, write this like you're a Stanford business school teacher. Write this like Reid Hoffman would write this. And I try to change the tone and see like, how does that change the flavor or how, people might receive the words that I'm writing. I use it I'm a creative, so I'm constantly thinking about new ideas. And I use it to say like, okay, this is a scenario. These are the 3 ideas I'm thinking. Give me some constructive feedback on how I might be able to improve it in this way. So I use it just really as a thought partner in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I find that I do very similar things. So for example, in communications, it can cold draft communications or refine. Mm-hmm. I think you also gave a very good prompting tip. It's kind of which easy prompts give you something that's really good at helping amplify. And like a Stanford, GSP student or an artist or a playwright or how would Hemingway write this email? Whatever the kind of thing is. I think it shows that you're experimenting and using and this kind of thing. A research assistant for information, summaries, and highlights, catalyze discussion, solve a blank page. Mm-hmm. All of those things are kind of things. And by the way, there's the tools for confidential data, are fast coming.
They're coming.
Microsoft, a bunch of folks kind of working on, okay, how do we get this there? Because obviously a lot of important work works that way.
And even enterprise level tools where they're saying, okay, if you're in this, walled garden for a company, then now you can use this. Because it's so funny. I can tell when my team is using AI now. We had to train people and say, okay, make sure you're not actually pasting the entire data set into this right now, please. It's not ready yet.
Especially when data sets have some degree of trust or confidentiality in them, their customer data or medical data or any of that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, no. Our first thing is always to preserve trust with the members of our ecosystem. So we don't, even if there wasn't a break, we don't want to even seem like there's anything we're doing that's a break as part of this. And, it's so essential to the work you do. What's been your most positive in this workflow surprise of, this amplification of me has been like, I'm going to keep doing that?
One, I am a terrible writer. I have great ideas. I know what I want to say, but it takes me a lot of energy to formulate email responses in a way that, is concise and direct and warm and all the things that a female CEO has to think about when you're doing correspondence. And having a tool that I can say, just this is what I'm trying to say, and then make it sound like this has helped me. It's relieved a lot of mental space in just my day-to-day decision-making. And that's just more space for me to actually do my job and not worry as much about how I'm coming off in communications, which as a leader, it is my responsibility, to think through that. But it is really helpful tool. And there's times when I forget it exists because it's not a part of my daily habits. I'm so excited for this next generation because it's going to be a part of their daily habit, right? Yep. So I'm like, oh yeah, I should open up this thing and, write it in here. And I really look forward to how AI is being integrated into these tools that we're using every day. So we don't have to all have these 5 to 10 different tabs of different software programs and sites that are better for this and better for this. So I think that's one thing that's really been helpful for me and just giving me more mental space to do the work that I love. And then the other thing is on the creative side, there's a lot of creative tools that I use that you can integrate different apps, right? We're getting to the point where different apps will integrate with each other. And so you can create an automated workflow. So for social postings or video editing or audio editing, click of a button, 2 or 3 apps will then communicate with each other through their APIs. And something that maybe would have taken us 2 days now takes us 10 minutes.
Exactly. And this, by the way, leads me to another question that I've been curious. I know that you're writing your first book, so hence the writing anxiety, the creativity. Did AI come in handy?
Yes.
Can you share any wisdom with our audience on this?
It's so interesting because we're right at that inflection point where most people still haven't totally used it in their day-to-day lives. So maybe like a year ago, I was meeting with my publisher and I said, hey, do you guys have any policies on AI that I should know about? Are there any sort of like guidance that I should know about? Because I want to follow all the rules. And they were like, no. And in my head, I said, oh, no, you need policy for this. I think if I asked them today, they'd probably give me a different answer. I would hope so.
They may have AI write their policy, but yes.
Right. Good point. Side note, I wrote an AI policy for our company and I said, yes, this policy was written by AI at the end of it. But I used it for a few different things, like chapter titles, for example, right? You write, this incredible chapter, and then you need to think of a 5 to 10 word little zhuzh that somebody will remember, and I used it for ideation for things like that, right? It's really a great ideation tool. Like I was saying earlier, you can play with the tone. You can say, make this witty, make this sassy, make this serious. And that's been really helpful just to get my brain out of writer's block when I'm ideating.
When I was doing impromptu, I discovered some similar things, although what I found is it was really good at kind of the blank page problem. It was really good at kind of like, what's the counter argument to this? Or what would someone ask me? What would be the hardest question someone asked me about reading this section? That kind of stuff. Right. Again, as you were saying earlier, it's kind of the research assistant, the personal intelligence, the kind of side companion.
Right.
I found that one of the things that was still really essential in the thing I was doing is, how do I say something surprising? Or what might initially seem contrarian, or like AI is amplification intelligence, not human replacement.
Right.
Like as a kind of an angle. Like once making the point, it could help me refine them with the zhuzh. But the coming up with that and being kind of that side angle, it was one of the things that in the dance between me and GPT-4 was still really helpful. Kind of for me doing it. I wonder if did you have similar kind of?
Definitely. I would ask it, I would say, this is what I'm writing about. This is my story. And I would just put in the bullets of like, this is the story I'm about to tell. Like I told the story about how I was raising my first round of funding and, GV led my Series A and I was so nervous. And, I literally wrote out this bullet point to the story because to me, it's not proprietary. It's about to be in a book. And then I said, if you were, and then I described this persona, if you were someone who knew nothing about venture capital, someone who knew nothing about Silicon Valley, what questions would you still have? Or what questions would you ask, right? Because, we're so deep in the world that we live in every day, but the majority of people don't sit in, Silicon Valley and Crunchbase and VentureBeat and all these different things every single day, right? And to your point, it's like playing chess with yourself, right? You can say, well, what would be the next step as my opponent? And then, okay, what's my response to that? I think that AI is only as good as the prompter.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I think people are really intimidated by it, but I would encourage, I think the most creative people are going to be the ones who get the most out of it, as opposed to it being something that replaces. I think it's something that will really enhance the limitations of our capacity.
I 100% agree. It's the reason why I kind of get everybody into experimenting with it, try to figure out what the things to do. People frequently say, I did a prompt and it didn't get a good response. It's not very good. It's like, well, did you try variations in the prompts? And did you say, respond like Ernest Hemingway, or respond like, William Faulkner, or respond like, any number of people as kind of a way of doing this.
Or follow a pattern. Right?
Yes.
Follow this framework, follow this pattern, problem, solution, story, right? You have to give it guidance.
Yeah, exactly. And think of it as a kind of a dance through it as a way of doing this. Well, this leads me to my next question, which is, closely tied to stuff that I think is where you and I first kind of tracked across. You're deeply engaged as well, but in the media ecosystem. What can you foresee as AI's impact on media in particular? From everything you've heard tonight about the future of work across various industries, is media destined for something different?
It's a really tough question, Reid. I mean, it's something that companies much larger than ours are struggling with quite a bit. I think that my perspective is that for media companies that solve a problem, I call it utility, right? Like a company that is providing content and information and entertainment that is a utility, meaning that people can actually use it, where there's value. I think that's never going to change, right? I think that companies that were relying on content farms, that were relying on just like the volume of things that it could have been company A or company B that wrote that. We're seeing it. I mean, we're seeing the change. We're seeing the layoffs. We're seeing the companies go bankrupt. But there's some things that are universal, and staying connected to your community is universal. Having opinions and perspectives and being open to read other people's opinions or hear other people's opinions and perspectives will never go away. And so when I think about the future of Blavity and how we're talking to our team, it's like, okay, one, something has to train AI, right? And that's people. There's people behind it. And how do we impact or partner so that we're a part of that conversation as opposed to being left out of it? And I think the generation that built the first version of all these tools and products that we use, like Netscape and everything, we maybe weren't a part of it because there wasn't a lot of Black folks that were in technology at the time. And now there are, and we're growing. So how can we make sure that at the beginning of this inflection point, we're having the conversations? I mean, we are having these conversations, and then actually being a part of the engineering on how this stuff is built, so that inevitably, when there's content that's being produced by AI, at least we've had some influence on the inputs.
Yep.
Right.
And when I've been talking to various people around this, a couple months ago, I had a discussion with Van Jones about this and other folks. Part of what has been, because I was like, look, we got to make sure that this time the game plays differently.
Right.
And he's like, look, one of the really good things, you say, hey, this is a new game, a new setting of the table. That's perfect. That gives me and our communities a chance to come play. Right. And what we need to do is get into it and be at the table right now and be experimenting with it and be doing it, be starting companies, be using it for media stuff. And I think others are so right about that. And it's the right time to say, look, the music's going, grab a chair. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Don't wait to be asked.
And the thing is
go
that
get the chair.
People of color oftentimes are the early adopters of technology, right? So it's not for lack of use, it's lack of access to get behind the scenes to build, right? Yep. So I think that's really where, for anyone who's watching this or listening, who's like, okay, how do I leverage this new technology? Figure out how to, don't be intimidated by the fact that it seems really complicated, because there's going to be an enormous new set of skills and jobs and roles and descriptions that are created at all of these big tech companies that we can't even think of yet.
Yep. Well, let's go a little deeper here, because this is super important. So in AfroTech, you've developed and nurtured such a valuable diverse community. I mean, as a technology, I think it's really important to constantly check in with users and explore, what am I not thinking about that I should be thinking while building and iterating? We had MOS episodes on this and check your blind spot as an example. So Morgan, what are you hearing from your network about the future work and the importance of diversity in AI's future that I should be mindful of?
Yes, AfroTech is right around the corner. We'll have over 20,000 people coming to Austin to learn about and get up to speed quickly on things like AI, VR, and actually so many different parts of the entire machine learning and augmented reality world. Last year, we spent a lot of time on metaverses and Bitcoin and everything. It's funny how these things change so quickly, right?
AI is going to be here for years.
Well, that's what they said about crypto.
I know, but
I agree with you. I agree with
yes.
you.
Yes.
I agree with you. It's already been here. It's been here. It's just now called AI, machine learning, all the things. Yes. I'm with you. I'm not trying to be a hater. But yes, in terms of the things that are important as it relates to AI in the AfroTech community, it's a couple things. One, sometimes the vocabulary, even to what we were just saying, machine learning, artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, just making sure that we feel confident in the vocabulary, because sometimes in our community, if it's not something that we're around all the time, we might say, this just sounds like too much. And in reality, these things have been around for a very long time, right? Like the concepts and the foundations of really the logic that we're talking about has been around for many, many years. And we as users have been using it for many, many years, right? It's just now mainstreamed and it has like a really great branding go-to-market going on right now. So I try to make sure that AfroTech, and for those who are really passionate about equity in the AI space, is consider using a little less jargon and just get to the point, right? Like, let's not worry about sounding smart. Let's like talk about what we're solving. The second thing is that some people have some fear around, how does this replace my job? How does this impact my value in the workplace? And I think that we should reframe that conversation to really be, how does it accelerate your job? How does it accelerate your value in the workplace? How much faster can you reskill yourself? How much faster can you understand and digest new concepts and do research so that you can spend more time on that your code of genius, right? And I think that leaders should be proactive in having the conversation. I see too many leaders lean back because it's new for them. And one of my goals with AfroTech this year is to just like really push people to think about, how are you putting this in your daily life? How are you putting this in your workflows? And lead by example.
I think you're exactly right. And I think part of the thing that, I encourage everyone is just like whatever question occurred to you in your business work, go do it. Like you said, it's almost like that, like the little game that they invented for this, which is which one's the AI read and which one's read thing. I was like, I think X, well, go try it and see what comes out and start learning where it's useful and where it's not useful as part of it. Right. And I think that experimentation, and don't just preach it, don't just talk it, walk the walk, right? Mm-hmm. Be the walk as you're doing. And I think that's exactly right. Plus,
and play also, with it.
Yeah, ditch the jargon, like engage.
Right. Exactly. I talk to a lot of executives who are thinking about AI, just like we were saying. How would you recommend that business leaders think about reskilling and retraining their technical workforce, given that, there's software engineers, I've seen this all over the internet, who are inputting their code to get it fixed into AI systems. And frankly, plenty of software companies are saying, yeah, we're going to just integrate AI into it anyways. We're going to solve it for you. You don't even have to open up another tab. So how would you suggest, first let's start with technical folks and technical leaders, that they reskill and educate their workforce so that, people can continue to have these jobs and stay engaged?
It's a great question. And it's also part of what I love about what you're doing is it's kind of this human amplification and kind of like, what do we do? And it's actually about how we're better. And sure, there will be some job replacement, but there's going to be a lot of job transformation. And that part of that job transformation, AI can also be the solution, not just the problem. You say, well, okay, so AI is going to superpower customer service people. Maybe we'll have fewer customer service people. What happens to the other customer service people? Well, AI can possibly help them find other kinds of jobs and say, oh, are you good at sales? Are you good at marketing? Are you good at other kind of communication? Are you good at account management? How do you learn that job? How do you do that job? What are the ways to integrate into a workflow in terms of doing that? Obviously, there's also even kind of AI as a way to upskill and reskill as you're doing, and also help you do the job. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're going to find in this. Part of it is there's such a gold rush with it that relatively few of the companies are doing kind of good apps on this stuff yet, because they're just kind of working on the pure AI general purpose. So right now, what people need to do is kind of hack it a little bit. Go use, try 3 or 4 different, kind of AI assistants. Try, GPT, ChatGPT, try Bing Chat, try Inflection, right. Try Claude, try Bard, try, and see them, how they play in, and see which things. And one thing to experiment a little bit on this is to experiment with what is known as meta prompts. So I really think it's prompt directing versus prompt engineering, because part of the kind of the way of this kind of experimentation, don't give them the answer, step them to the answer, like as education, like say, well, the answer to this problem is X, and say, well, the answer walk them through the steps to this problem, like help them step through to this problem, and AI can actually do that, and that's part of use of the meta prompts. And anyway, so I think we'll be hacking it and experimenting a little bit, like what Saul Khan's doing.
Yeah,
I think that's the way we're going to be solving this problem. I don't know if you agree.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I think really, I mean, you just wrote out a whole business plan for a company that could very easily be worth $100 million one day. So
Yes.
definitely credit us. Give us a chance to angel invest. But
Yes,
like
exactly.
seriously, right? Like all these platforms that are already existing for reskilling, for training, for self-development, for learning and development could also be adding their own AI mechanisms that help people get faster through whatever learning and development and professional development they're trying to go after. So I do agree with that. And I think, I do wish and hope to influence companies to make it part of their responsibility as well, because at the end of the day, like it's much cheaper to retrain people. And there's a limited amount of people who have 10 years plus experience in some of these new technologies because they're new. So it's already a really tough competition for this pool.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, Morgan, I'm so glad we got the time to sit down and strategize together. This is Masters of Scale.